Nobody actually teaches you how to breastfeed before your baby is born. And then that moment happens, your baby's with you, and then you're just expected to know. I'm Erin. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner and lactation counselor, and I am here to walk you through what I talk to parents about every single day. Here's what I need you to know before we start. While breastfeeding is natural, that doesn't mean it's always easy. Both you and your baby are learning a new skill, so if it feels hard, it's because it is hard, but it does get easier. Let's start with breastfeeding positions because the position sets everything else up. The goal with any feeding position is to bring your baby up to your level versus bringing your body down to your baby's level. You're feeding your baby 8 to 12 times a day early on, and when you're hunching your back, you're in uncomfortable positions, it really adds up. So to have successful breastfeeding, make sure to find a position that works for you and your baby and bring your baby up to your level. Here are the 3 positions that I see work most frequently in clinic. Cross cradle is a position that I recommend for most families because I see families doing really well with it once they get the hang of it. So your baby is lying horizontally to you and their tummy is on your chest or tummy. So your opposite hand is going to support them underneath their ears. I know it sounds weird because you think that you want to put your hand right here in the back of their head, but really you want to support them around the neck. This helps babies get more range of motion because they just don't have a lot of neck control. When you put your finger right here, it makes them so they can't move their head back and might have an issue with their open gape. Then you're going to shape your breast if you'd like to with the hand of the side that your breast is on. And so you shape it underneath, not too close to the nipple, but underneath. And then you're going to aim your nipple at their nose, wait for them to open up their mouth really wide, and then you're going to give them the little shove with love. We know that baby is in the right position in cross cradle if their tummy is to your chest or to your tummy. So their tummy to your tummy or their tummy to your chest. Their ear, their shoulder, and their hip are all in a straight line. So you are providing their core stabilization, and then their little legs are kind of curved around your body. Football hold is also a common position that people like to breastfeed in, especially moms who have had C-sections. They find it a little bit more comfortable than having the pillow across their body. So you still want to have your pillow up toward your breast, so like a breast shelf. Then your baby will come along your side like you're holding a football. So your baby is getting their core stabilization from the side of your body versus the front of your body. You're still aiming your nipple, so doing the C hold and aiming your nipple at their nose. You want to support the base of their neck. So then they open their mouth, they gape really wide, and then you shove them on your breast. Their little legs are curved right around the back of your body. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging if you have a very long baby or as your baby gets older, but as your baby gets older, you find different positions that work for your family. A lot of moms ask me about side lying position, and I think it can be a lifesaver when you're very, very tired. You just want to make sure you're not going to fall asleep. So in side lying position, you are literally laying on your side. Your arm can get a little bit wonky, so you just find a position that works for you. You're laying on it or it's down to your side. And then your baby is facing you. You're aiming the nipple at your nose. They have the stabilization because of the bed or whatever surface you're lying on. And then you are still giving them a little bit of core support. And then you're going to latch them just the regular way. So a lot of families really love it. But just make sure your baby is safe, that there's no possibility that they could roll backwards off a couch or off the bed, and that you're not going to fall asleep. Here's the piece of latch technique that I see moms miss all the time. So they might watch every video, but these are the very important things that can mean a good latch versus a bad latch where you're feeling very uncomfortable. So your baby's already in position. They're already up to your level versus you down to their level. And first, I want you to use the hand that's closest to your breast to shape your breast. So usually it's recommended to do a C hold. You want to be away from the nipple, so past the areola, so your baby actually has enough room to latch onto. So you can squeeze down a little bit to your comfort level. If your baby's in cross cradle, you're going to use your opposite hand and you're going to give them support underneath their ears, around their neck, versus putting your hand right here, like we talked about, because they can't move their head like this. And then you are going to, I know it sounds weird, but aim your nipple at their nose. We don't want to aim it at the mouth because they're just going to go right in like this and get a shallow latch, and we want a deep latch. So you're aiming it at their nose. We're hoping that they open their mouth up big, and then you're going to shove with love. So when I talk about shove with love, it's not just like, ugh. You have to really give them some oomph because they don't have a lot of strength to get up there themselves. So when they're newborns and they're really little, you're shaping your breast, you're aiming the nipple at their nose, they're opening their mouth up wide. And as soon as you see them open up their mouth like this, you're going to go and put them on the breast. Like, you got to go for it. How do you know if the latch is good? It should feel pretty comfortable. Sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable right at the very, very beginning of the latch, but it should get better within a few seconds. If it's not, you want to put your finger into the corner of baby's mouth, rub your finger along their gums to break the seal, and then try to latch again. If you're looking for more in-depth information on how to latch, I have a 7-minute video that will help you latch and then make sure you're doing it correctly. And if you're doing all the things and you're still having pain, that's when you go and see a lactation professional in person. Now, here's one question that I get all the time, and it's really one of the most common reasons I see babies in their first week. It's how do you know how much your baby is actually getting? And here's what I look at. First, I always look at wet and dirty diapers. So I want to make sure your baby is getting enough fluid in that they're peeing. So every day of life that they are until your milk comes in, they're having at least one wet diaper per day, if that makes sense. So it's like day 1, there's 1 wet diaper. Day 2, there's 2 wet diapers. And then once your milk comes in, we want to make sure that there's 5 to 6. Really, I like 6 or more saturated wet diapers. Now, poop, I want to make sure that the poop is transitioning from that thick meconium to more of like thinner, yellow, seedy poop once your milk has come in. So every day, once your baby's eating more and more and more, their poop should look a little bit different until it starts to get to that yellow, seedy poop. Next is their weight. So babies are born and their weight often drops in the next few days. So it is normal for a baby to lose up to about 7 to maybe upwards of 10% of their body weight, but we don't want them to lose any more. By day 5 of life, we're hoping that babies are just gaining and gaining and gaining. We're looking for somewhere between 0.8 to 1 ounce per day average since your last visit. So we're weighing your baby often to make sure that they're gaining the weight that they need. Now, if they're not gaining, sometimes they're really, really sleepy, and then it can be this negative spiral we'll talk about in a second. The next thing I'm looking at is their feeding behavior. I want a baby to be vigorous when they start on the breast, and they might get a little bit sleepier as the feed goes on, but they should be able to stay awake for an entire feed, whether the feed is 30 or 40 minutes. Now, if your baby gets on the breast and they're falling asleep right away, that's a red flag. Now, babies that get on the breast and fall asleep right away are probably not getting a lot of milk. And when they're not getting a lot of milk, that's telling the brain to make less milk because of supply and demand. So then babies are then not getting enough calories to sustain the next feed and the next feed and the next feed, and they get sleepier and sleepier. And then you might see their wet diapers go down. They might have less wet or poopy diapers. So if your baby is so sleepy, or if your baby is so hungry all the time, they're showing you hunger cues, you're feeding them, they seem like they're hungry right after a feed, I think it's worth it to go to see a lactation professional. If this is helpful, make sure to like and hit subscribe. I put out videos like this every single week based on what I actually teach families in clinic. A question I get all the time is, how often do you need to feed a newborn baby? So we might hear that you need to feed your baby every 2 to 3 hours. Parents hear that, and I think that they hear 3 hours, 8 times in a 24-hour period. When you are breastfeeding a baby, babies often don't follow that 2 to 3 hour schedule. Maybe sometimes they might be hungry at 1 hour and 45 minutes, and sometimes it might be closer to 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's not always the same. So watch your baby's hunger cues, feed them when they're hungry, and don't think it's abnormal if your baby's eating somewhere between 10 to 12, maybe even 13 times in a 24-hour period. The good news is that anytime your baby is removing milk, that is telling your body to make more milk. So even if they're getting small amounts of colostrum in those early days, that is triggering to your body, hey, let's make milk come in a little bit faster and let's increase the milk supply. And remember, the clock starts when you start the feed, not when you end the feed. Should you wake a baby to feed them? This is a controversial question, and as an IBCLC and nurse practitioner who sees a lot of babies in their first few weeks of life, yes, I want you to wake them up. I know it seems like you should never wake a sleeping baby, but in the early days, the reason why I want you to wake them is because sometimes they're so sleepy that they can sleep forever and ever and ever, and then they're missing all these important nutrients that they need to sustain feeds in the future. So if you have a very, very sleepy baby, they might never show you that they're hungry and that they're ready to eat. So make sure you wake them up until they hit their birth weight and they're gaining weight consistently. If you have any questions or you're feeling like they're just so sleepy that they're never waking up, it never hurts to go and get them weighed to see, are they getting enough? While we're talking about schedule, let's talk a little bit about cluster feeding. Now, cluster feeding is when your baby is eating very frequently. Sometimes it's right after you finish feeding. Sometimes it's shortly after you finish feeding. And it often happens in the late afternoon, early evening. It is normal. It is telling your body to make more milk. So it's not a whole bad thing, though it can feel really, really hard when you're like, all I am doing is feeding my baby. Make sure you have one-handed snacks, a lot of water, and then just get comfortable on the couch or wherever you're feeding and feed your baby on demand. Let me quickly talk about 5 things I often see in the first few weeks of feeding so they don't shock you when they happen. The first one that I want to talk about is engorgement. So when your milk transitions from colostrum to transitional milk to more mature milk, you might feel a little bit of engorgement. That is hard, firm breasts that feel maybe like rocks. It is not the most comfortable thing that you will feel. It is temporary. I have an entire video dedicated to engorgement and what to do. The next is nipple soreness. It is very common to have some discomfort when your baby is latching over and over again. Your nipples have never needed to be elastic before, and then they do. But if you are experiencing pain, like it's not just like, oh, it's a minor discomfort and then it gets better. If you're experiencing actual pain, if you're noticing that your nipples are really chapped or there's any blood, or if you're noticing any sores, that is definitely reason that you need to work on your latch or see a lactation professional. The next thing I see a lot in the first few weeks is a baby who is very sleepy. So your baby went from the womb where it's nice and cozy out into this world out there, right? And so they're putting a lot of effort and energy into eating and pooping and peeing and staying awake for short periods of time. So sometimes they can be so sleepy that they don't want to have full feeds. Now, there are ways to get your baby more. So that is doing a little bit of compression or massage while they're eating, but you really need to stimulate your baby to keep them awake. And sometimes it's not just like, hey, baby, wake up. You kind of have to like really move their arm. I like to rub my fingernails on the bottom of their feet because I don't like it when their feet are touched. Doing something that is going to kind of rouse them from their sleep and help remind them that they need to eat. The next thing I see is bottle feeding questions. So a lot of parents want to know, when do I introduce a bottle? What bottle do I introduce? And how do I feed my baby? I am going to link a video on paced bottle feeding so you can go back and forth between the breast and the bottle. The last thing that happens in the first few weeks that I wanted to talk about is triple feeding. So triple feeding is breastfeeding your baby, then formula feeding your baby, and then pumping. So if your baby is very sleepy or if your baby is not getting enough from the breast, it ensures that they are getting enough calories to kind of break this cycle of this sleepy baby not removing milk and then milk supply decreasing. What it does is ensures your baby is getting XYZ amount of calories from formula, and then you're pumping to tell your body to make more milk. It is meant to be temporary, like 5 days max, and you don't have to do it every single feed. Sometimes you can pump instead of breastfeeding directly, but there are ways to get out of this triple feeding cycle because it's meant to be temporary. And we don't want your baby to fill up on a ton of formula. We want them to get most of the milk from the breast. So make sure you are working with a pediatric provider and you're working with a lactation professional to figure out how to do triple feeding in a way that works for you. Remember, it is never the wrong idea to ask for help. Though breastfeeding is natural, it's not always intuitive. You don't always know what to do in any given situation. So you are learning a new skill and your baby is learning a new skill. If you are feeling like your baby is not gaining enough weight, they're not having enough wet or poopy diapers, if you're noticing that their skin is getting yellower, they're so sleepy that they can't even finish a feed, those are all reasons to go and see a medical provider. If you'd rather do an online appointment, I offer virtual one-on-one consultations that I will link in the description below. We can talk about your feeding plan and really anything that you want to know. Breastfeeding has a learning curve, but I promise you it will get easier. Make sure to like and hit subscribe. Bye-bye.